بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلله فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فقد قال الله تبارك وتعالى في كلامه المجيد وفرقانه الحميد بعد أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم وعهدنا إلى إبراهيم وإسماعيل أن طهر بيتي للطائفين والعاكفين والركع السجود وقال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم أحب البلاد إلى الله مساجدها صدق الله العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك لمن الشاهدين والشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت العليم الحكيم ربي زدني علما. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah, in today's presentation, we will be going through the masail, the laws, the rulings pertaining to Itikaf. Starting with the definition of Itikaf. We've all heard the word Itikaf. What does it mean? In the Arabic language, you'll find that all such words have two meanings to it. You have the lughawi meaning, the linguistic meaning, and then you have the shari'i meaning, right? The istilahi meaning or the shari'i meaning, i.e. the legal meaning. So the lughawi meaning of i'tikaf is al-lubthu, right? Al-lubthu or al-iqamatu wad-dawamu ala shay. To remain, to stay, or to be regular in action or state. This is the lughawi meaning, the linguistic meaning of i'tikaf. As for the shari'i meaning, the definition of i'tikaf in fiqh is huwa al-lubthu fil masjidi ma'a as-sawmi wa niyyat al-i'tikaf. To remain in the masjid in a state of fasting with an intention of i'tikaf. So if a person sits in the masjid, right, and he intends to do sunnah i'tikaf, but he is not fasting, this i'tikaf is not valid. Similarly, if a person is sitting in i'tikaf in the month of Ramadan and he breaks his fast, his i'tikaf is also broken. So the condition is that you need to sit in i'tikaf in the masjid, in a shari'i masjid, with the state of fasting, in the state of fasting. What is the ruling of i'tikaf? Right? What is the status, the legal status of i'tikaf? So al-i'tikafu sunnatun mu'akkadatun fil ashr al-awakhir min shahri Ramadan al-mubarak لفعله صلى الله عليه وسلم فقد كان يعتكف العشر الأواخر من رمضان منذ قدم المدينة إلى أن توفاه الله تعالى. I'tikaf is sunnah mu'akkadah for the last 10 nights of the blessed month of Ramadan, due to it being an established practice of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He used to sit in i'tikaf during the last 10 nights of Ramadan in the entire Medinan period of his Mubarak life. Sunnah Mu'akkadah refers to an emphasized sunnah. It's an action that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam did regularly. He encouraged others to do so without mandating it on them, right? However, this is a general definition of Sunnah Mu'akkadah. When it comes to these actions, for example, we have Sunnah Mu'akkadah al-Kifaya, right? The Sunnah Mu'akkadah al-Kifaya for janazah salah or for i'tikaf, etc. Then this refers to an emphasized sunnah, right? But if it is carried out by a group of individuals in the community, then the sin falls off from everybody else. Otherwise, everybody is sinful. If nobody does it in the community, if nobody sits in i'tikaf, right, in the masjid, then the entire community is sinful. Similarly, if nobody comes forward to perform the janazah salah of a person, right, after his demise, then the entire community is sinful. So, أن اعتكاف العشر الأواخر من رمضان سنة مؤكدة على الكفاية. إذا قام بها بعض المسلمين سقط الطلب عن الباقين فإن واظبوا على تركها بلا عذر أثموا. That this type of sunnah, right, is also على الكفاية. So kifaya means to suffice. So if a few people are doing it, it suffices for the rest of them. Meaning the emphasis applies to an entire community. If a few individuals observe i'tikaf, the responsibility is fulfilled from the remainder of the Muslims. Otherwise, all are guilty of sin. Now, what is the basis of i'tikaf? Right? Where do we find that i'tikaf comes about? The concept of i'tikaf comes about. So we have two ayat in front of us, right, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَعَهِدْنَا إِلَىٰ إِبْرَاهِيمَ وَإِسْمَاعِيلَ أَن طَهِّرَ بَيْتِيَ لِلطَّائِفِينَ وَالْعَاكِفِينَ وَالرُّكَّعِ السُّجُودِ. That we instructed Ibrahim alayhi salatu wasalam and his son Ismail alayhi salatu wasalam that purify my house. Purify the house of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the Masjid al-Haram, لِلطَّائِفِينَ, for those individuals who will come to perform tawaf. Right, so one action that is carried out in Masjid al-Haram is tawaf. وَالْعَاكِفِينَ, and those who will remain in the masjid. Right, those who will come and spend their time in the masjid. وَالرُّكَّعِ السُّجُودِ, and those who will perform ruku and sajda, i.e. perform salah. Another one is وَلَا تُبَاشِرُوهُنَّ وَأَنْتُمْ عَاكِفُونَ فِي الْمَسَاجِدِ. This is an instruction to the menfolk to refrain from mubashara, right, from engaging in any intimate relation with their spouses, right, whilst they are in the state of i'tikaf in the masjid. وَأَنْتُمْ عَاكِفُونَ فِي الْمَسَاجِدِ, i.e. when you are remaining in the masjid. So we find that these two ayat of the Holy Quran, they refer to the concept of i'tikaf. So i'tikaf is basically simply coming and sitting in the masjid. Right, a person can come for a short while and sit in the masjid with the niyyah of i'tikaf. This will be a nafl i'tikaf. Right, this is why the ulama mentioned that every time a person enters the masjid, right, they should just make intention of i'tikaf, not the sunnah one, the nafl one. A person will be rewarded accordingly. Then the basis for this practice in the blessed sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we have the narration reported by Aisha radiyallahu ta'ala anha. She says, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم كان يعتكف العشر الأواخر من رمضان حتى توفاه الله ثم اعتكف أزواجه من بعده. She says that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would perform i'tikaf in the last 10 days of Ramadan until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala took him away, and then his noble spouses used to do i'tikaf after him. Meaning they used to also perform i'tikaf in their homes. Right? The azwaj mutahharat, the respected wives of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, would perform i'tikaf in their homes. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam would perform it in the masjid, in Masjid Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and his wives would perform it in their homes. Then another basis for it is consensus, right? Ijma'. So وقال ابن المنذر في الإجماع, Ibn al-Mundhir rahimahullah ta'ala states, وأجمعوا على أن الاعتكاف سنة لا يجب على الناس فرضا إلا أن يجبه المرء على نفسه نذرا فيجب عليه. Ibn al-Mundhir rahimahullah ta'ala, he says that they have made a consensus, right? They have done ijma', i.e. the ulama, that i'tikaf is sunnah. It is not fard on anybody. It is not mandatory on anybody. إلا أن يجبه المرء على نفسه, except when a person, he makes it wajib on himself. So from this we understand that there is another form of i'tikaf, which is the fard or the wajib form. So we have the sunnah one, which is carried out in the last ashara of Ramadan. Then we have a nafl one, right? A person who is not able to sit in the sunnah i'tikaf, he can make niyyah of nafl i'tikaf, the optional i'tikaf. Or a person is coming into the masjid for a short while between asr and maghrib, right, for a couple of hours. A person can make niyyah of i'tikaf. And then there's another i'tikaf which is wajib, right? Something which is mandatory. When does the i'tikaf become mandatory? Well, there's two scenarios. One is that a person, he says to himself that if a certain task of mine is accomplished, then I will sit in i'tikaf, right? So this is a wajib i'tikaf. Or a person, he was sitting in sunnah i'tikaf, and due to a valid reason he had to break his i'tikaf. There was a medical emergency and he had to leave, right? In that case, this person will have to sit in i'tikaf, in wajib i'tikaf. But for that he will only have to sit for 24 hours, right? From maghrib of one day till the maghrib of the next day, So need to be in the masjid before Maghrib Salah, so that when Maghrib Salah takes place, he is in the masjid till the next day's Maghrib Salah. This is a wajib form of i'tikaf, but this is actually a qadha of the i'tikaf that he had broken. Now, what are the virtues, what are the fada'il, the merits of i'tikaf? We have a narration in front of us reported by Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He says, قال رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم إن الله قال من عادى لي وليا فقد آذنته بالحرب وما تقرب إلي عبدي بشيء أحب إلي مما افترضت عليه وما يزال عبدي يتقرب إلي بالنوافل حتى أحبه فإذا أحببته كنت سمعه الذي يسمع به وبصره الذي يبصر به ويده التي يبطش بها ورجله التي يمشي بها وإن سألني لأعطينه ولئن استعاذني لأعيذنه وما ترددت عن شيء أنا فاعله ترددي عن نفس المؤمن يكره الموت وأنا أكره مساءته. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, so this is a hadith Qudsi, which is a hadith that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam is narrating from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has announced, whoever shows enmity to a wali of mine, I declare war on him. Right? So if a person, he is showing enmity, animosity, he has bughz for a person who is close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who is a friend of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is declaring war on him. Right? And this is not a small matter. Right? This is a severe matter. When Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declares a war on a person, that means that person's life is finished. Right? Another place where it has been mentioned that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala declares war on a person is when a person engages in riba, in interest-based transactions. This is mentioned in the Quran. The next part of the hadith states, the best action a servant can do to get nearness to me is something that I have mandated on him. After that, a servant continues to excel and progress towards me through engaging in optional acts of worship until I love him. So the fard and wajib acts are those that we need to do anyway. Right? Take the example of purchasing a house. Right? You have a house. Right? So there are certain things in the house which you will definitely put in. Right? Without it, the house is not going to look like a house. You have the foundation, you have the walls, you have the pillars, you have the heating or whatever, right? After that, there are certain things which are extra, right? It enhances the look of the house, right? It makes the stay inside the house comfortable, right? So these are our nafil actions, right? If our nafil actions are there, right, they will beautify our a'mal in the sight of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and they will take us more closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that a servant continues to excel and progress towards me through engaging in optional acts of worship until I love him, until Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves you. So if you want the nearness and the closeness and the love of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, we need to engage in optional acts, right? Another example is of the example of nafil acts is like that of a brick, right? That if you have the construction, right, and if there's any cracks in the bricks, right, these optional acts, right, they fill the void, right? If a brick has been removed, if a person, for example, he was deficient in his fard acts for whatever reason, right, but he was perpetual in his nafil actions, right, he was perpetual with his tahajjud, his ishraq, his duha, his awabin, his other salahs, then the void is filled by these nafil acts that are practiced and carried out. When I love him, Allah Ta'ala is saying, I become his ears through which he hears, his eyes by which he sees, his hands through the medium of which he grasps, and his leg which he uses to walk. Meaning every action of a person after that, when he has become close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, every action, every step he takes, right, everything that he looks at, he is doing it out of love for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and doing it to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And every action of his is measured and it's thought out so that the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not carried out. When he asks me, I certainly grant him, right? A person becomes mustajabud da'wat. A person, right, whenever he asks Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants him. And every person has got needs which they want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to fulfill. So the key to that is doing the fard and wajib acts and also doing the sunnah and nafil acts. When he seeks my protection, I grant it to him. Right? I grant him my protection. I protect him from calamities, from ailments, from issues and problems. And if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has still made a decreed for a person to get into a calamity, if Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has decreed for a person to be faced with an ailment, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala comforts him. Right? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Hakim Akhtar Sahib rahmatullahi alayhi used to mention that Allah ta'ala makes his heart gum proof. Right? Meaning gham, you have the grief. So Allah ta'ala makes his heart grief proof. Meaning from the outward, if you look at the person, he's facing a lot of issues. Right? He's facing a lot of trials. But from within, a person is content. Right? A person knows that he's heading in the right direction because Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is with him. So when he seeks my protection, I grant it to him. I do not hesitate from anything like how I hesitate to take the soul of a true believer. Right? He dislikes death and I dislike upsetting him. Meaning a person, right, generally, and this is mentioned in one hadith, Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he mentioned, Man ahabba liqa Allah, ahabba Allahu liqa'ah. Wa man kariha liqa Allah, kariha Allahu liqa'ah. That whoever loves to meet Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves to meet him. And whoever dislikes meeting Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala dislikes to meet him. So Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she was there. So she said to Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam that which person does not dislike dying? Meaning every person has that fear, that anxiety of dying, right? So it's tab'i, it's natural for a person to have that. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said to her that, O Aisha, this is at the time of death. Meaning at the time of death, there's inkishafat, there's openings, you can see Jannah, right? You can see the life of the hereafter, and at that time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants to see which person after seeing this wants to go to him and which person still wishes to remain in this temporary abode. So here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is saying that a person will dislike death, right? And I dislike upsetting that person. Another virtue, Itikaf distances one from the fire. This hadith has been reported by Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma. He says أنه كان معتكفا في مسجد رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم فأتاه رجل فسلم عليه ثم جلس فقال له ابن عباس يا فلان أراك مكتئبا حزينا قال نعم يا ابن عم رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم لفلان علي حق ولا وحرمة صاحب هذا القبر ما أقدر عليه قال ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما أفلا أكلمه فيك فقال إن أحببت قال فانتعل ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما ثم خرج من المسجد فقال له الرجل أنسيت ما كنت فيه قال لا ولكني سمعت صاحب هذا القبر صلى الله عليه وسلم والعهد به قريب فدمعت عيناه وهو يقول من مشى في حاجة أخيه وبلغ فيها كان خيرا له من اعتكاف 10 سنين ومن اعتكف يوما ابتغاء وجه الله تعالى جعل الله بينه وبين النار 3 خنادق أبعد مما بين الخافقين. Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma reports, he was the cousin brother of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, the son of the son of Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu, who was the uncle, the paternal uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He reports that while he was once performing i'tikaf in Masjid Nabawi, a man came to him. He greeted him and he sat down. Abdullah ibn Abbas said to him, I see that you seem sad and troubled. Right? There's something wrong. You seem a bit grieved. So the man replied, yes, O son of the uncle of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, I am indeed troubled in that I have an obligation to fulfill to somewhat. Right? There is a haqq over me that I need to fulfill and I have not fulfilled it. Hence I am troubled. I swear by the holiness of the occupant of this honored resting place, referring to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that I am not able to fulfill its obligation. So Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, he put on his shoes and he proceeded. The man said that, have you then forgotten that you are in i'tikaf? When you were sitting in i'tikaf, have you forgotten you're breaking your i'tikaf, you're going out? So he said, no, the time is still fresh in my mind. I heard the esteemed master of this blessed resting place say, whoever sets forth in a way and makes an effort of settling a necessary affair on behalf of his brother, that service shall be better for him than to perform i'tikaf for 10 years. And whomsoever performs i'tikaf for a day, thereby seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open 3 trenches between him and the fire of hell, the width of each being the distance between the heaven and earth. So the purpose of bringing this i'tikaf is to highlight this last sentence which Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma mentioned, that whoever performs i'tikaf for a day, right, so this would be a nafil i'tikaf, thereby seeking the pleasure of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah will open 3 trenches between him and the fire of hell. I mean, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will distance him from the fire of Jahannam, right? 3 trenches, and the width of each trench is the distance between the heaven and earth. Meaning how huge and how vast is the difference between the earth and the heaven, right? It's huge. So 3 such trenches will be made. Meaning Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will keep a person away from Jahannam. Right? The point that Abdullah ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma is mentioning here is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will keep a person away from the fire of Jahannam for performing i'tikaf in the month of Ramadan. One other narration from Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she says, أن النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال من اعتكف إيمانا واحتسابا غفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه. Right? There's a series of ahadith of this nature regarding iman and ihtisab, right? Regarding Ramadan. So من قام رمضان من صام رمضان إيمانا واحتسابا غفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه ومن قام رمضان إيمانا واحتسابا غفر له ما تقدم من ذنبه. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam has highlighted various actions, right, that are carried out in the month of Ramadan, and the fadila, the virtue is that a person's past sins will be forgiven, right? The usul that the scholars of hadith mention here is whenever the hadith mention that the past sins are forgiven, it refers to the minor sins, right? The minor sins of a person are forgiven. As for the major sins, a person ought to make tawbah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. A person has to make istighfar and tawbah. And similarly, if a person has embezzled another person's wealth, huquq, rights, etc., then a person has to make ask that person for forgiveness, right? Then a person is forgiven in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha narrated that Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, whoever observes i'tikaf with iman, right? Two examples or 2 explanations have been provided here. Imanan, in the state of iman, right? Or another explanation is that iman meaning having faith in that action that you are doing. So man sama Ramadan imanan, if a person he fasts in the month of Ramadan in the state of iman, or knowing iman, having faith in the fasting of the month of Ramadan being mandatory. Here i'tikafa imanan, that he has iman in the amal of i'tikaf being sunnah, wahtisaban, and he has hope of reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then all his previous minor sins will be forgiven. عن ابن عباس رضي الله تعالى عنهما أن رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم قال في المعتكف هو يعتكف الذنوب ويجرى له من الحسنات كعامل الحسنات كلها. Abdullah ibn Abbas رضي الله تعالى عنهما narrates that Rasulullah صلى الله عليه وسلم said regarding the one observing i'tikaf, he turns away from sin. And this person who's staying in the masjid, firstly, he's sitting in the masjid, which is the most beloved of places to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Secondly, right, if he's doing i'tikaf correctly and properly, then he's refraining from sin. He's cut off from the outside world where all the vices and evils take place. Right, yes. If he brings the evils and vices into the masjid himself, right, then that's a whole separate matter. Right? Then a person could be sitting in the masjid, right, and he is worse than the person who's sitting outside of the masjid, walking in the marketplaces where his gaze is low. Right? So a person, if he wishes to turn it around, that's a different matter. But huwa ya'takifu dhunub, right? This person is turning away from sin, and he enjoys receiving thawab like a person who does all acts of khair that draw thawab. Meaning it's possible that a person is sitting in the masjid and he is not able to do other actions of khair outside of the masjid, right? Helping other people outside of the masjid, right? Maybe caring for his parents, right? He is not able to personally tend to them. He's got somebody else doing it, right? So this person who's sitting in the masjid doing i'tikaf, he's going to get all the reward, right, of a person who could do the actions outside of the masjid. Now, what is the wisdom behind i'tikaf? Right? Number one, fort. Right? A person enjoys protection from temptation and sin based on the hadith of Sayyidina Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, while racking up all kinds of rewards for action that he is unable to do because of being restricted. Right? So this is the last hadith that we just covered right now. Right? A person has basically entered a fort. He's protected from the harms and the vices outside, right? And also he's getting all the reward that a person could get outside of the masjid. Another is being in the company of angels, right? The company of angels is one of the best companies a person could get, because the angels are ma'soom, they are sinless, right? They are pure creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So being a guest in the house of Allah and enjoying His hospitality day and night is an incredible privilege and honor by itself. Couple that with the fact that angels occupy the masjid adds to the spiritual splendor that our ruh, our soul, needs to overcome the beast within us. Right? So this is another hikmah, another wisdom, right, behind sitting in i'tikaf, that a person is in the company of angels. Now, just generally being in good company is something of great excellence, right? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that al-wahdatu khayrun min jalisi su, that being in solitude, being alone, is better than adopting bad company. Wal jalisu salihu khayrun min al-wahdati, but being in good company is better than being alone. So if being in good company of humans is good, then imagine being in the company of angels who are of a higher level, right, in terms of being pure and clean. Another wisdom is hibernation. Like some creations of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala who go to hibernate when the elements are not favorable to live in. Right, a person goes into self-exile of something for whatever reason and emerge when their surroundings and environment is conducive to them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us the entire month of Ramadan to rehearse on how to be true servants who keep Him a priority, whose hearts are committed and conscious of Him at every beat. He then grants tawfiq to observe i'tikaf in His house so that a person can build themselves and be ready to emerge stronger in faith than when he or she began i'tikaf. Right? So Ramadan itself, right, is a training exercise of how we should be spending the entire year. So if we spend our Ramadan correctly, right, and we train ourselves to spend this month properly, then it is hoped that we will spend the remaining 11 months properly. And then the cherry on the cake is if we sit in i'tikaf, right? We sit in i'tikaf and we seclude ourselves, and it's just between just us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allama ibn Qayyim rahimahullah ta'ala, he mentions one of the hikmats or one of the wisdoms of i'tikaf is to gain qurba to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to such a level, right, such intimate closeness with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that nothing can come in between. Right? This is what we're actually doing in i'tikaf. Right? You come to the masjid, right? You leave all the worldly affairs behind us. It's just us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And once that relationship is created, right, and it has been solidified and it becomes strong, then this relationship it is hoped that a person will be able to maintain this relationship outside of Ramadan as well. Another wisdom is constantly waiting for salah, right? And constantly waiting for salah is perpetually in salah, right? A mu'takif, a person who's sitting in i'tikaf, remains in salah so as long as he continues to be in the masjid waiting for the next salah. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam mentioned in one hadith that a person who comes to the masjid, right, and he sits between adhan and iqamah, right, he's waiting for salah, it is as though he is in salah. So a person, what does that tell us? That a person who's waiting for salah is like he's in salah. A mu'takif is always waiting for salah, right? There's nothing else that he is going to occupy himself with. So he's constantly waiting for salah. So this person is always getting the reward of being in salah. Another is getting the chance to cash in with Laylatul Qadr. Right? Laylatul Qadr, right, is the most virtuous nights in a person's life, in a Muslim's life, right? But catching Laylatul Qadr is extremely tricky, right? It's very difficult. When is Laylatul Qadr? We don't know, right? When exactly is Laylatul Qadr? We don't know. It's going to be in the last 10 nights, right? Or if you narrow it down, it's going to be in the last 5 odd nights, 21st, 23rd, 25th, 27th, or 29th, okay? A person who's not in i'tikaf, there is a possibility that he may not catch it because he might be at home, he might get occupied in other a'mal or in other actions, right, in other things, and he may sleep or something and he may miss the Laylatul Qadr. Okay, but a person who is in the masjid, right, even if he doesn't engage in any a'mal, he's still in the masjid, right, so he's still got Laylatul Qadr. So in the last 10 nights for Ramadan, we have been advised to search for the night of Qadr, the night of power. When we are at home, we are unable to maximize our ibadah every single odd night of the last 10 nights. We tend to then exert ourselves on the 27th evening, right? We think that the 27th evening is going to be Laylatul Qadr. This is just one opinion, that it is Laylatul Qadr. Now, a mu'takif has a chance to cash in by engaging in ibadah every night. It's guaranteed win for him or her. Opportunity to train the nafs to speak well, to behave in accordance with shari'ah. This is another wisdom. Being in the masjid makes one aware of where he is. Right? A person, you'll notice that he's sitting in the masjid, he's not going to use foul language. Right? He's not going to swear. Even if a person is irritated, a person is going to control himself. Right? Even if somebody, is angry and frustrated with somebody else, he's going to make sure that he doesn't. A sane person, right? A person in the right state of mind is not going to quarrel and fight in the masjid, right? So a person who is in the masjid, right, he's always, careful of his surrounding. So a person is able to train himself, right? If he stays away from sinning, from using foul language, fighting, quarreling for 10 days, right, he'll be able to practice that outside of the masjid as well. So being in the masjid makes one aware of where he is and who is ever observant of him besides the regular attendees of the masjid. When the mu'takif says or does anything, he is aware of the sanctity of the place he stands in. This enhances his ability to speak well, to do good, and in general to carry himself with dignity and self-respect. How a Muslim should, with the akhlaq and embodiment of sunnah that he is supposed to adopt, refraining from reprehensible behavior and the disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in short, i'tikaf will serve as a training phase for a person, right? The masjid will be a training ground for a person of how he should behave when he is outside of the masjid. Right, types of i'tikaf and their method. Right, the first one is the wajib i'tikaf, the mandatory i'tikaf. Right, the i'tikaf that a person necessitates on themselves through nadhr. Right, by saying, I make i'tikaf binding on me for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on XYZ day, right, on a certain day. عن عبد الله بن عمر رضي الله تعالى عنهما أن عمر سأل النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم قال كنت نذرت في الجاهلية أن أعتكف ليلة في المسجد الحرام قال فأوفي بنذرك. This is the basis for this i'tikaf being wajib, right? That Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhuma, he narrates, he says that Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, my father Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he asked Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam that I had vowed in the days of Jahiliyyah that I will perform i'tikaf for one night in Masjid al-Haram. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said to him, then complete your vow, right? Complete your nadhr. Meaning if a person vows to do i'tikaf, he has to complete it. Another narration from Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she says that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Man nadhara an yuti'a Allah falyuti'hu, wa man nadhara an ya'siyahu fala ya'sihi." If a person, he makes nadhr, he makes a vow to obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then he should do so. Right? If a person, for example, he said that I am going to give $100 in sadaqah, he needs to complete it now. He needs to fulfill it. He needs to fulfill that vow. If a person says that I will perform 20 raka'at of nafs salah, right? He needs to complete it now if he made another. وَمَنْ نَذَرَ أَنْ يَعْصِيَهُ. But if a person, he says that I will watch a movie, right? He makes a vow that I will watch a movie or I will, commit a certain act of haram, of sin, فَلَا يَعْصِيهِ. Then he is not supposed to fulfill that. A note here is that it is a precondition for this type of i'tikaf to be observed in the condition of fasting. The mu'takif has to be fasting during the day, right? So for example, if a person said that I'm going to do i'tikaf for 3 days, okay, wajib i'tikaf for 3 days. So what he's going to do is he will come. So just say he's starting from Monday night. So from Monday Maghrib he's going to be in the masjid. Okay, then on Tuesday he's going to fast. On Wednesday he's going to fast, right? And Thursday he's going to fast. And then Thursday Maghrib time, after that he can exit the masjid. This is how a Wajib i'tikaf takes place. The next is Sunnah Mu'akkadah. That i'tikaf that a person observes in the last 10 nights of Ramadan. He or she will begin from Maghrib, the time of iftar on the 20th night, until the crescent of Shawwal is sighted. The narration and the basis for this is the hadith of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, which we have covered previously, that Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wasallam would perform i'tikaf in the last ashra of Ramadan. Again, it is a precondition for this type of i'tikaf to be observed in the condition of fasting. The mu'takif has to be fasting during the day. Then we have the Mustahabb i'tikaf. That i'tikaf that a person can observe at any time, which is also a nafl i'tikaf, for any duration of time, and it need not be in the condition of fasting. So this i'tikaf, it could be for 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 1 hour, 2 hours, whatever. Right? Imam Muhammad ibn Hasan al-Shaybani rahimahullah ta'ala explains that the least duration a person can observe optional i'tikaf is 1 sa'ah, which would mean a moment in time. Right? So this, a person will get reward for an i'tikaf in that as well. And Ya'la ibn Umayyah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu قال إني لأمكث في المسجد الساعة وما أمكث إلا لأعتكف. That Ya'la ibn Umayyah radiyallahu ta'ala anhu, he says that I stay in the masjid for a moment, meaning a person just pops in to maybe grab something or whatever, right? So I stay in the masjid for a moment, and I do not remain except that I am doing i'tikaf, meaning I've just made the niyyah of i'tikaf. Now let us go through the conditions for the validity of i'tikaf. So these are all the fada'il, the virtues, the merits, and the wisdoms behind i'tikaf. Now coming on to the conditions for the validity of i'tikaf, meaning when will i'tikaf be valid. Number 1, Islam, right? It is a condition that the person is a Muslim, right? All acts of ibadah in Islam are mandated for Muslims. Number 2, sanity and adulthood, right? Any act of ibadah is accompanied by taklif, by being mukallaf, right? By being responsible in the sharia. The responsibility that sharia gives to all able Muslims. To qualify for disability, one would either not be in the right state of mind, so a person is majnoon, right? Or a minor upon whom ahkam taklifiyya do not yet apply. Meaning, if a person is a Muslim, right, but he's a child, okay, or a person is not in the right state of mind, then his i'tikaf is not going to be valid, in the sense that it is not going to be a proper shari'i i'tikaf. Number 3 is intention. Intention is extremely important. As we see with the first hadith of the Jami of Imam Bukhari rahimahullah ta'ala, among other compilations of ahadith, actions are based on intentions, right? Most of the books of ahadith, they're going to start with this, innamal a'malu bin niyyat, right? Actions are based on intentions. A person intending to observe i'tikaf must have expressed an intention to do so prior to iftar on the 20th evening of Ramadan. So if a person, he came and he joined i'tikaf, and a person came and joined i'tikaf, and he did not make intention of sunnah i'tikaf, right? And the Maghrib salah of the 20th of Ramadan has finished, is his i'tikaf valid? No, right? So intention is very important. Intention is very important. Even with fasting, a person, he stayed hungry the entire day, but he didn't intend to fast. Now intention doesn't have to be verbally all the time, right? Intention is fi'lul qalb, is the action of the heart, right? The ulama say that if a person is getting a lot of waswasa and a lot of doubts, then for him it's better to just say it verbally, so that he doesn't get doubt that I didn't make the intention, right? But then a person shouldn't do ghulu in this as well. Sometimes what happens, a person is standing, right, in the saf for salah, and 1-2 minutes, right, the intentions are just being said, right? The imam's gone into ruku, this hazrat is still saying the intentions. So this is also important to keep in mind. The next condition for the validity of i'tikaf is masjid. For men, i'tikaf must be observed in such a masjid wherein regular 5 times salah occurs, right? So a shari'i masjid. For women, right, we will explain further where they should observe i'tikaf, inshallah. So women will perform i'tikaf in the house. Number 5, state of fasting. i'tikaf has to be observed while one is fasting. If one is not fasting, it will be regarded as mustahabb. Right? So for wajib and sunnah i'tikaf, you need to be in the state of fasting. Number 6, purity from hayd, nifas and janabah. The first two will be explained under the discussion of women observing i'tikaf. However, a man who is in a state of janabah is not allowed to begin observing i'tikaf in this state. Should he happen to fall into janabah after beginning i'tikaf through no physical action of his own, then his i'tikaf remains valid. So if a person is already in the state of i'tikaf, he's already in the masjid, and he gets into the state of janabah, right, due to a dream or something that he saw, then his i'tikaf is not broken. Yes, if a person carried out such an act, right, which which put him into hadath akbar, in the state of larger impurity, then this person's i'tikaf will also break, along with the fast breaking. Right. The ruling for women. For women, it is recommended that they sit in i'tikaf in a section of their house that they have dedicated as a musalla, right, a place where they will perform their salah. Similar to salah, it is better for them to observe i'tikaf in their homes rather than the masjid. They can delegate domestic chores to others and focus on acts of ibadah, maximizing their observance of i'tikaf. However, if the woman has nobody to do the chores, right, and she has to come out of that place, then her i'tikaf will not invalidate. If a woman intends to sit for a sunnah i'tikaf, she must be free from hayd or nifas in the beginning, right? So she shouldn't be in that state, right, when she's sitting for i'tikaf, otherwise the i'tikaf is not going to be valid. Should she experience hayd or nifas after starting to observe i'tikaf, she will have to break it and do qada at a later date. Similarly, she will need to ask for her husband's permission if she's married to sit in i'tikaf. Imam Kasani rahimahullah ta'ala, he says that inna i'tikafaha fi baytiha astaru laha fakana afdal, right, that for a woman to sit in i'tikaf in her house is more concealing for her, right, and this is more virtuous, it is meritorious. However, there is no question of permissibility. Again, there's an ikhtilaf in the madhahib regarding this, right? For in the Hanafi madhab, it will be makruh tahrimi for a woman to come and observe i'tikaf in the masjid. As believers, we take guidance from the sunnah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which is وَبُيُوتُهُنَّ خَيْرٌ لَهُنَّ, that their homes are better for them. Some guidelines for women performing i'tikaf. In observing i'tikaf for women, we learn a few points from the below hadith. Having secluded quarters and asking permission from the husband if she is married in the beginning, if he later retracts, this will not affect his initial permission. So if he agreed for her to sit in i'tikaf in the beginning, then it will be permissible for her to continue with her i'tikaf if he revokes the permission at a later stage. And this ruling, and these rulings rather, are based on the narration that you can see on the screen, which have been reported by Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, and in there is mention of Hafsa radiallahu ta'ala anha, another respected wife of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I'm not going to go into the entire hadith and the translation of it, but the summary and the crux of it is what has just been mentioned above. Now, what nullifies i'tikaf, right? What will make your i'tikaf invalidate? What will break it? So exiting the masjid without a valid reason. Remaining in the masjid is the rukn, is a fard element of i'tikaf. Once a person compromises on a rukn of an ibadah, his or her ibadah is invalid. For example, takbir tahrima in salah. Valid reasons will be explained in the next slide, inshallah. So if a person has a valid reason, which we are going to cover shortly, then the i'tikaf doesn't break. Other than that, the i'tikaf breaks. Engaging in intimacy, a mu'takif is not allowed to engage in any form of intimacy, whether embracing, kissing or marital relations. In the event of marital relations or any sort of behavior that leads to climax, the i'tikaf will break and one will be required to do qada of the i'tikaf in the condition of fasting. The start of hayd or nifas, this applies to the women folk, that having understood that fasting is a requirement for the observance of i'tikaf, should one's hayd or nifas begin while she is in i'tikaf, it will break and she will have to do qada of 1 day, sunset to sunset, regardless of the days remaining from her sunnah i'tikaf. The qada will have to be done later, right? So qada is always going to be 24 hours. Even if the i'tikaf was 10 days, a person broke it in the second day, third day, or on the 8th day or 9th day, whichever one, it will be 24 hours. Anything that breaks one's fast, so anything that breaks the fast will also break the i'tikaf. Food, drink and intimacy, nourishment to the brain or stomach, and acts resembling intimacy resulting in climax, deliberately vomiting a mouthful, inserting medication or the like in one's private parts. So these are all things that will break a person's fast, hence they will also break a person's i'tikaf. So what is allowed for the mu'takif, right? So which things, if done, are not going to affect the i'tikaf? Exiting the masjid due to answering the call of nature. Now the toilet is not going to be, the lavatory is not going to be inside the masjid boundaries, right? So for that reason a person will have to go out, and this will not break a person's i'tikaf. Wudu, again the wudu facility is not going to be in the boundary of the masjid. So if a person exits the boundary of the masjid, right, and here we're talking about the shari'i masjid, not the building of the masjid, right? So if a person, just say this is the boundary of the masjid, if a person exits there, right, to do wudu, then fine, right, to use the toilet, then fine, but there's no reason and goes there to, smoke a cigarette or something, then the i'tikaf is broken, right? Fard ghusl, right? A person is in the 10 days, you're not allowed to do normal ghusl, right? Only a fard ghusl is permissible to do in the state of i'tikaf. Attending Jumu'ah, this is if a person is doing i'tikaf in a masjid where the Jumu'ah does not take place, right? If the Jumu'ah is taking place there, he's not allowed to exit the masjid just because he wants to go to another masjid for Jumu'ah, right? A normal bath does not count as a valid reason to exit the masjid, neither does janazah salah, right? So janazah salah will also not count as a valid reason. If a person exits the masjid due to janazah salah, then the person's i'tikaf is broken. Eating and drinking in his or her place of i'tikaf. This is a necessity, so the one observing i'tikaf may eat or drink in the masjid, keeping in mind the reprehensibility of consuming anything that results in an odor being emitted from one's mouth which would inconvenience others, right? So a person is permitted to eat in the masjid, but a person should be mindful when he's eating in the masjid that he's not eating those things which cause taklif to other people, right? Like a person likes his dar chawal with onions on the side, so he's eating raw onions, right? This is going to emit an odor from his mouth which is going to cause taklif to other people and to the angels as well. So a person should keep that in mind. Laying down and sleeping in the masjid. This is again a necessity for the mu'takif. So generally a person shouldn't be lying down in the masjid, right, for no reason. Leaning, sometimes what happens that a person, they will lean and stick the legs out towards the qibla reading the Quran, right? These things, these are against the adab of the masjid. But so generally a person shouldn't be sleeping in the masjid, but in this case, right, a person is exempted, a person is permitted because he is going to be staying here for 10 days. However, he should be mindful to not sleep in a public place manner which would inconvenience those looking at him resting. This is why the cubicles and these things are made in the masajid, so that there's some level of privacy maintained. Wearing good clothes, fragrance and overall maintaining a presentable appearance. Just because one is in the masjid does not mean one should abandon basic hygiene and being presentable, right? So being in i'tikaf is not like being in the state of ihram when you go for umrah and hajj, that you can't use any perfume, scent, right? At that time you need to be ash'ath aghbar, you need to be a bit, disheveled to show your humility in the court of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So in that scenario, a person is not allowed to use perfumes and itar and sewn clothes and these kind of things. But in i'tikaf, it is permissible for a person to maintain his hygiene, right? Use itar, right? Keeping in line with the sunnah, right? So to neglect this is not keeping in line with the sunnah. Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha, she reports, in kana Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam la yudkhilu ilayya ra'sahu wa huwa fil masjidi mu'takifun fa urajjiluhu. That Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, right, he would, so how Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha's home was, right, if anybody has been to Masjid Nabi, they see you have the two rows here, then you have the Mubarak grave of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. This was the hujra, the room of Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha. So it was adjacent to the masjid, right? So here you have the shari'i masjid. So Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam would be in the masjid in the state of i'tikaf, but he would just put his head in to the room, and Aisha radiallahu ta'ala anha would comb his hair for him. To speak good without prolonging one's speech. One isn't supposed to observe silence as a means of devotion. Speaking is permitted, and as the sunnah guide is, guides us, فَلْيَكُنْ خَيْرًا أَوْ لِيَسْكُتْ. This is a general rule of life, right? If a person wants to speak, speak good, otherwise just zip. That's it. Speaking to family through a means of communication or directly. To completely become distant with one's spouse and family is not appropriate, right? One should keep in touch, right? Find out that if everything is going well at home. Yes, if a person has got all the matters sorted, he's got somebody else looking after them, taking care of them, and he wants to keep his mobile phone switched off, then that's fine, right? But generally it is permissible for a person, as long as the person is not engaging in long video calls and whatever in the masjid, right? And there's no harm in that. Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam met Sayyida Safiya radiallahu ta'ala anha he was in i'tikaf. So this brings us to the end of the rulings and the guidelines of i'tikaf. If anybody has any questions, inshallah, we can take any questions before we end it.
For the masjid, if one of the weekend perform what are the boundaries and
Record.
Yes, last thing like I mentioned.
Yeah.
So the whole of this hall, except the ladies'